It's time for me to focus on my passion.
The roaring voice is not exactly saying that. It's close. First of all, there is a roaring voice because your desire is very strong. But what the roaring voice is saying is, before you can help someone else, you have to hook up to the helpful stream, which means you have to be selfish enough to figure out where that is. And sometimes the people around you, with all their wants and needs and desires and beliefs, and many helpful things too, sometimes they just distract you. And so that feeling that you keep having is that it's time for me to take care of myself isn't because it's not lovely to help others. It's because you just got to do that first. That just has to be a more dominant thing, and that's what we've been talking about all day here today. So what you've been feeling fits in perfectly with what the content of this gathering has really been about. And you understand that really well here and now. We could have had that conversation with you, this much of it, that conversation with you at any point along the way, and you couldn't have heard it. But this seminar today, the hours that you've been listening, caused you to be ready, to be ready, to be ready, to be ready. So you heard that. You all heard that in a way that you would not have heard it otherwise. What kinds of things or what kind of requests are people around you making of you that make you feel distracted?
I think it's just starting at such a young age, of like that consistent dependency from family.
Yeah, but you said just now something was on your mind. What is it? What are others asking of you that you feel is distracting you from what you really need to be about right now? What are they asking? Or are you just making it all up?
That's
Is it a perception that you have that has no valid basis?
I think it's a belief that just kind of...
A belief? Well, a belief's a thought you keep thinking. So jump into that belief somewhere and tell us what it is. I believe that I need to what?
I believe that I need to take care of other people before myself. That's... Because
it's better to give than to receive?
Because it's more comfortable to give than to receive.
Okay, now let's just stop there for just a little bit. It's more comfortable to give than to receive because I believe that giving is good and receiving is bad.
Yeah.
Stay there for a minute. Because giving makes others say, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And receiving makes others say maybe something different. Have you been taught that it's selfish if you receive, but it's nice if you give?
Well, culturally, just being Middle Eastern, yeah.
Cultural?
Absolutely.
Okay, what does the culture teach?
It's women take care of the husbands and really serve the man, and it's a very self-sacrificial culture. And I pulled
Well, now, don't
away.
get too carried away.
Yeah.
Don't get too carried away, because everyone can hear it and maybe relate a little bit. But let's not call it cultural. Let's call it sort of human. Almost everyone who comes together with almost everyone. Now, we get it that in some cultures there's a deeper stream of consciousness like that, but isn't every relationship kind of like that? I want you to give to me and I want to give to you, just to some extent. Now, the reason that we want to start here in a more basic place is because when you said it feels better, you did say that, didn't you? It feels better?
To give? Yeah.
If it's feeling good, if there's satisfaction in it, then you must be onto something. And we don't need to talk about whether the culture is right or wrong, but if in the moment of giving it feels good, then you must be onto something. So let's talk about why, just like in the last segment. Let's talk about why that feels good. So we brushed on this earlier, but you're really going to get this. We know you understand because we never stop talking about it, that as you are living life, knowing what you don't want and knowing what you do want, you are asking. Step one. And that source is answering, step two. And then that all day we've been talking about how you have to get into the receiving mode in order to let in what you've asked for, that source is already lined up. When you are in that receiving mode, so think about when you're in the receiving mode, how do you think source finds a way of giving to you or others? Are you seeing any angel pipes? Is there a conveyor belt from heaven? Stand in this line. This is the receiving line. Step two is coming right down this pipeline right here. And you just stand right here with your little whatever it is and get yours. We're being absurd, we know. But it's not coming in like that. So how is it that the exchange is happening? Doesn't the good that comes to some come through others? We haven't said this in previous written books. We're just beginning to explain it to you here in the last 2 or 3 seminars, that when you've performed step 1 and now you are in step 3, often source, your inner being, law of attraction, universal forces, God, whatever you want to call that consciousness, utilizes your open valve to give to others through. Doesn't that make sense? Haven't you been inspired in your giving? Haven't you been in the right place at the right time? And hasn't it felt so wonderful that you can't even begin to explain how good it feels? Because when you're tapped into the resources and they are flowing through you to some object of attention that you have, and that person is also in the receiving mode, then they're receiving through you and you're receiving. In other words, no wonder that feels good. That's how it all fits together. But what if that's felt good, but then you start reading books about how inappropriate it is for others to make demands through you? You say, but wait, it felt really good until I thought about it from that perspective, and now, yeah, he is pretty bossy and pretty demanding and pretty entitled, and that is pretty sexist. And then you get yourself in a place where you're not in the receiving mode, but your culture is still saying, well, these things should be performed by you. And we want to say to any of you, anyone who is giving to anyone in any other personal state of being than being in the receiving mode is going to get depleted and resentful, because it's not how the laws of the universe works. But it also is wrong-headed. It is not accurate with the laws of the universe to say, I shouldn't be giving to others, I should only be receiving for myself. Do you know who is the biggest recipient of what you give to someone else? You. Because as it went through you, you benefited by it. In other words, that satisfaction factor is there. So you might want to ask yourself, am I a giver or a taker? That's the way humans lay it out. Am I a giver or a taker? Well, if you are human, you're some of all of that. And sometimes you're on the receiving end and sometimes you're on the giving end. But if you have practiced understanding what the art of allowing is, if you've practiced being in the receiving mode so that you're predominantly in the receiving mode, then the universe will utilize you in all kinds of different ways in order to be at the right place at the right time to assist someone else in this and that and the other. And then it doesn't feel like a giver and a receiver. It feels like a co-creator who is rendezvoused. It feels like co-creation at its best, because you can't be joyful in your gift of giving, which at the core of you is there, if you're not giving. One time, many, many years ago, Jerry told this story to Esther from the day she met him, that someone had said to him, Jerry, if everybody was like you, you'd really mess the world up. And Jerry said, what are you talking about? He said, you never want to receive. You only want to give. You only want to give. You never want to be a receiver. And if everybody was like you, just wanting to give, who would receive? How would the world go round? Well, Jerry thought that was a kind of funny way of looking at it, and he didn't understand it when he was saying it to Esther, and Esther didn't understand it when he was saying it to Esther. But now you are understanding it here today, aren't you? And so, of course you want to be a giver. But you can't be a giver unless you are a receiver. And so what that roaring voice has been saying to you is, you got to get into the receiving mode, which you translated in, I got to let it in for me, not for them. No, that's not what you're hearing. I got to let it in for all of us before I can give it to anyone, you see. Isn't that nice to know? Now, it might be, because sometimes you're co-creating with others who don't know this. You just learned it, didn't you? So it's a pretty good chance that hardly anybody you know knows what you just came to know. So let's say that you're co-creating with someone who really isn't thinking about that, and they're mostly in the receiving mode. But let's say that you're with somebody who maybe mostly isn't in the receiving mode. Maybe it's a long-term relationship. Maybe it's somebody that you're just with right now for whatever reason. And that person, instead of being in the receiving mode, is in a demanding mode, in an entitled mode. And they're looking at you as the vortex through which their satisfaction must come. Well, that doesn't feel good to you. And sometimes you just can't run away. You have no choice other than to be there. But at least understanding it helps you to know. And you can, it is our promise to you, no matter what's going on, you can, if you care enough, you can get into the receiving mode, and it will change the way things are happening for you. If you begin to notice that you're being taken advantage of, they will come in spades to take advantage of you, because law of attraction just has to line that up. If you have been noticing that you are in the receiving mode and that you are plentiful and that you have plenty to give and that you are replenished continually and it just flows through, then really only those who are a perfect vibrational match to all that you know will make their way into your experience. Really good conversation. It puts so many things in place. So sometimes you have conversations about your children, those greedy little children who seem to think that they should have everything that they want and they should have it right now. Well, they were sort of hardwired to believe that. But what went wrong is they believe that you are the vortex through which it all flows. And at first, you encouraged that because you liked that. It felt good because you loved those kids when they were little. You loved them so much when they're asleep. You love them so much that you can hardly look at them without being in the receiving mode. They are the reason that you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on so much of the time. And when you feel like that, the feeling of giving and flowing is so strong within you. But then you begin to analyze, because you're wise in this deliberate creation, that you really want them to understand their receiving mode. And so you become a wise parent who doesn't meet their demands. You meet them when they're in the receiving mode. You let your inspiration to rendezvous with them and their inspiration to rendezvous with you. You let that be the basis of your experience. And you don't gather around you demanding anybody's. Demanding children, demanding employees, demanding employers, demanding boyfriends. You don't gather around you anybody who's making demands, because you're in the receiving mode and they don't have access to you. When you're in the receiving mode, what they have access to is your inspired giving, for which they are inspired to receive. And that is just the most delicious, orgasmic, best experience of a lifetime, to rendezvous with someone who's ready to be ready while you're ready to be ready. You see what we're getting at? Whew. Thanks to your important question, we were able to take everything that we were talking about to a whole new place of understanding. Yes?
Yes. Thank you.
Something more?
No.
Really good.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Really good. This has been the most satisfying conversation that we've ever experienced with the likes of all of you. What we have felt from you is a greater, more consistent resonance with who you really are than usually happens in an environment like this. It is a credit to your willingness to come here. It is a credit to your willingness to just listen to this rather slow-moving conversation. Most of all, it's a credit to the desire that you hold, the desire to come into alignment with who you are, and the desire to live happily ever after. We are eager about what's coming next for you based upon what just took place today. And it is our desire that you pay some soft attention to the differences in the way things begin unfolding for you, like right away, like beginning right now, as a result of the more aligned state of being that you've accomplished. Don't make a big thing about all of this. Don't make it an academic endeavor. Let it be a satisfying thing. As you leave this room, say to yourself, I'm going to do the best job I can do of following my path of least resistance. And we want you to know that your path of least resistance is the path that feels the best to you. It's the path of thought. It's the path of conversation. It's the path of behavior and action. Just do your best to follow your path of least resistance just for a little while. Because we promise you that if you will follow your path of least resistance, you will follow it all the way to complete alignment with who you are. And then you will be engaged on a moment-to-moment, all day long, relationship with the power of your inner being, and therefore the power of the universe. And those who are watching you are going to be sort of surprised at how light you seem to be, how lighthearted you seem to be, how easily things begin to unfold for you. Just take it easy and enjoy this. And if you've heard anything from us, we don't make requests very often, because you are the creator of your own reality, and we are the teachers who help you to understand that and to show you kind of how to do it.